These real witch hunts that ended in pure evil will blow you away. These are real events involving real people who lived, suffered, and passed away, and in each case, the ending wasn't justice, it was just pure evil. The Salem witch trials. A scream pierced the cold February air of 1692. 9-year-old Betty Paris lay thrashing in her bed, her cousin Abigail Williams beside her, clawing at her own neck as if unseen hands were retching her. Outside their home in Salem Village, rumors had already begun to spread, whispers of the devil walking amongst them. Now, the Puritans who settled Massachusetts believed the world was a battlefield between God and Satan, and they lived in constant fear of damnation. Now, the smallest misfortunes, such as a ruined crop or a sick cow, could be explained away by witchcraft. But when Betty and Abigail's strange fits began, the village was ready to believe something far darker was at work. The local doctor declared there was no natural cause. That left only one explanation. The girls were victims of witches because, it couldn't possibly be anything else, Soon, under pressure, the girls accused 3 women, one being Tituba, the enslaved servant in the Paris household. Another was Sarah Good, a destitute beggar, and Sarah Osborne, a sickly woman who rarely attended church, which at the time was the biggest deal. Now, Tituba's confession shocked the community. She spoke of black dogs, red cats, and a tall man from Boston who promised her freedom if she served him. Whether coerced or fabricated, her words unleashed hysteria. Neighbors accused neighbors, old grudges resurfaced as proof of dark pacts. The trials that followed were a masterclass in paranoia. The court allowed spectral evidence, claims that an accused witch's spirit had appeared to torment someone, even if they were physically somewhere else. One by one, victims fell. Bridget Bishop, the first to be executed, was unalived in June. By September, 19 had been executed. One man named Giles Corey was pressed to his demise under heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea, and at least 5 others had passed away in the squalor of Salem's jails. When the madness finally subsided in 1693, the damage was irreversible. Families were shattered, reputations destroyed, and the courts themselves discredited. Years later, the colony would formally apologize and compensate the victims' descendants, but that could never undo the raw terror that consumed Salem during those fateful months. The Torsaker witch trials in 1675 in Sweden. Now, the snow-covered hills of Torsaker were silent on the morning of June 1st, 1675, except for the heavy boots of guards escorting 71 prisoners towards a frozen execution ground. They were mothers, all bound, all condemned to perish. Now, Sweden's witch panic, known as Det Stora Översandet, the Great Noise, had been raging for years. The Lutheran Church and the Crown were convinced the devil was recruiting women to his service, taking them to a mythical place called Blackula for satanic feasts and just other crazy stuff. Now, in Torsaker, the hysteria began when the local minister, Laurentus Christofori Herenus, claimed 2 children in the parish could identify witches by a secret mark only they could see. Week after week, villagers were called to stand, before the church. The children would walk past them, touching those they claimed were witches. That was all it took to seal a person's fate. Now, the interrogations were brutal. Suspects were threatened with eternal, damnation if they didn't confess. Many broke under the pressure, admitting to flying through the night, meeting the devil, and casting spells. The charges were absolutely absurd, but the confessions, whether forced or imagined, became undeniable proof. On execution day, the condemned were led to a hill outside the village. One by one, they were basically beheaded with an axe, and their bodies then, kind of burned on pyres to prevent their spirits from returning. In a single day, Torsaker lost more than 1/5 of its women. It remains the largest mass execution for witchcraft in Sweden's history. A moment when fear and religious, fervor basically turned neighbor against neighbor. neighbor, and the truth just no longer mattered. The Wurzburg witch trials from 1625 to 1631 in Germany. Now picture a city where every day could be your last. That was Wurzburg in Germany during one of Europe's worst witch hunts ever. Now the early 17th century was a time of war, famine, and a lot of disease. In Wurzburg, Prince Bishop Philip Adolf von Ehrenberg saw witches literally everywhere. It began with a few arrests, women accused of kind of just ruining crops or spreading plague even, but the trials spiraled quickly. Whole families were targeted, even noblemen and city officials were not spared. Children as young as 9 were accused of dancing with the devil and sent to burn. I mean, the methods of extraction were horrific until they confessed, and confessed they did, naming, others to end their suffering, which only, fed the endless chain of accusations. The numbers are staggering. In Wurzburg alone, between 157 and 219 executions took place across the surrounding territories. The demise toll may have reached about 900. The frenzy was so all-consuming that it threatened to depopulate entire villages. The Pappenheimer witch trial in 1600 in Munich, Germany. Now, in the summer of 1600, a ragged family wandered the streets of Munich. Now, the Pappenheimers were beggars accused of petty theft and other stuff, but when a string of unsolved crimes terrified the city, officials decided they'd found their scapegoats. Under torment, the family was forced to confess not only to the crimes in question, but also to witchcraft, devil worship, and just a laundry list of impossible acts, poisoning, wells and unaliving children and desecrating the Eucharist. Now, the more they denied, the worse the torment became. Authorities staged the executions as public theater. The Pappenheimers were paraded through the streets, mutilated, and displayed before the crowds. Their supposed witches' tools were actually burned alongside them. This wasn't justice. It was a warning to the poor and the powerless that literally anyone could be next. The trial became infamous across Europe and just a symbol of, cruelty. Even in a time, when witch hunts were common, the sheer brutality shocked onlookers. But for the Pappenheimers, there was no outcry strong enough to save them. Their names became synonymous with evil, not because of what they did, but because of what was done to them. The Bonus witches in 1679 in Scotland. Now, in the coastal town of Ness, Scotland, the winter of 1679 brought with it more than just cold winds from the Firth and Forth. It brought accusations of the devil walking amongst the townsfolk. Now, 5 women, Margaret Pringle, Bessie Vicker, Annabel Thompson, and 2 Margaret Hamiltons, were accused of witchcraft, along with 1 man, William Craw. Now, the charges were wild, honestly, holding drunken feasts with the devil in human and animal form, making pacts in exchange for protection, and transforming into animals to avoid capture. The most disturbing confessions came from Annabel Thompson, who claimed the devil visited her as a man in black and promised to ease her poverty if she served him. Margaret Hamilton, an elderly widow, said that she had served him for 3 decades, often in the form of a black dog. Now, whether these were delusions, coerced statements, or just outright fabrications, the court treated them as, proof. On December 23rd, 1679, the condemned were asphyxiated with iron collars, their bodies burned at the stake, and the execution was public, part punishment, part, spectacle, meant to remind the living there of the price of basically dancing with the devil. Now, today, the Bonus witches are remembered not as servants of darkness, but as victims of a darkness far more real, the cruelty of human fear. Now, across continents and centuries, these stories repeat. Fear turns to accusation, accusation to torment, torment to execution. Innocent lives ended not because of what they'd done, but because of what their communities were willing to believe. Which witch is too witchy even for you? Let me know. I'm your host, Ashley. Stay spooky.